Jimmy Hoffa and Robert Kennedy were two of the biggest figures in mid-20th century American politics. They also hated each other's guts, and their public interactions could be full of tension or riddled with petty jabs, or both. So, today we're going to take a look at the outrageous feud between Jimmy Hoffa and Robert Kennedy. In 1957, Robert F. Kennedy, still a relative novice to politics and the labor landscape in the United States, was appointed Chief Counsel of the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor and Management. More commonly referred to as the McClellan Committee, it was basically a big investigation of mob influence in labor. It was also where Robert Kennedy and Jimmy Hoffa would have some of their most vitriolic exchanges, because Hoffa was a perennial all-star of mob influence in labor. Both Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy worked with the McClellan Committee, John as a senator and member, Robert as the group's chief counsel. Once John became president in 1960, Bobby was appointed attorney general, and the two brothers worked together to take on corrupt labor organizations and underworld syndicates. Before Robert Kennedy's stint as attorney general, infamous FBI chief J. Edgar Hoover, for unclear reasons, did not acknowledge the existence of underground groups like the Mafia. He publicly dismissed them, like someone might dismiss aliens or werewolves. And after his appointment, Kennedy complained that the FBI didn't know anything really about these people who were the major gangsters in the United States. As a result, Kennedy expanded the Justice Department to take on organized crime rings and racketeering directly. The agency, which consisted of just 2 or 3 lawyers reading files prior to his arrival, soon grew to about 60 lawyers, presumably also reading files. Listen, investigations at this level often look like dozens of people collaborating on a book report. According to Ronald Goldfarb, a lawyer who worked in the Kennedy Justice Department, Robert Kennedy encouraged government agencies to work together instead of competing with one another. Jimmy Hoffa, from the perspective of the Kennedys, was the embodiment of the type of corruption that needed to be rooted out. By taking him on, they set a precedent and cast a wide net for their larger fight. After his appointment, Kennedy threw himself into investigating Hoffa, a union leader with alleged unlawful ties to organized crime. Both Kennedy and Hoffa were determined and hardworking. They also both absolutely hated each other in a childishly competitive way, like bitter Little League rivals. For example, each night when Kennedy left his office in Washington, D.C., he would pass by the Teamsters Union building. One night, while walking with politician-turned-journalist Pierre Salinger, who also worked as his presidential campaign manager in 1968, Kennedy noticed lights on in Hoffa's office at 1 a.m. He immediately told Salinger, "If he's still at work, we ought to be," and he went back to the grind for another 2 hours. According to his lawyer Edward Bennett Williams, Hoffa caught wind of this and made sure to leave his lights on around the clock, just to mess with Kennedy. Simple, effective, and you gotta respect the pettiness. Jimmy Hoffa was the head of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters from 1957 to 1971, and to Robert Kennedy, he personified corruption. This belief drove Kennedy in his unrelenting efforts to bring the Teamster boss down. These efforts included the Get Hoffa Squad. Though that wasn't their official name, the Get Hoffa Squad was made up of several Justice Department lawyers and investigators, all tasked to, well, get Hoffa. You could tell Kennedy was thinking about a presidential career, because he recognized the importance of slogans you can fit on a hat. The Get Hoffa Squad has been accused of taking some, shall we say, legally vague steps in their pursuit of the Teamster boss. According to James Neff, author of Vendetta, Bobby Kennedy versus Jimmy Hoffa, Kennedy and the Get Hoffa Squad secretly recorded Hoffa's lawyer, Edward Bennett Williams, and had the IRS conduct audits on lawyers who represented Hoffa and his fellow Teamsters. Nobody can bully like a Kennedy can bully. Williams was aware of Kennedy's affinity for wiretapping, and once noted Kennedy had an ace in the hole. That ace was Courtney Evans, an assistant FBI director whose hobbies included eagerly signing off on pretty much any proposed use of microphones as an investigative technique. Nixon would have loved that guy. Hoffa couldn't trample on Kennedy's constitutional rights the way Kennedy could do to him, but he made up for it in sheer pettiness. He took every opportunity possible to antagonize Kennedy, such as spelling the senator's first name Bobbie, like a waitress at a Texas roadhouse. In a message to Teamsters and their families in the union's October 1960 newsletter, Hoffa advised readers that Jack and Bobby, that's Bobby with an I-E, had a police state mentality. The Jack in question was then presidential candidate John F. Kennedy. Thanks for watching, and check back next time to hear more about our weird history.